Hello and welcome to this, our second in a series of presentations for the McGraw Online Gathering 2020. You can find out about our programme by visiting our website at www.clanmcgraw.org or by visiting our Facebook and Twitter pages. Links to these appear at the bottom of our website's homepage. Contact details for our society will appear on the screen at the end of this presentation. My name is Sean Alexander McGraw, and I am the Chieftain, or Cian-Finna, of the McGraw Society. In today's presentation, titled Heraldry and the McGraw, we will look at the history of heraldry and its distinctive use in Ireland. Heraldry is everywhere in Ireland. Despite its artistic merits, we adore it because of its association with history. A walk around Belfast or Dublin will bring you into contact with heraldry around almost every corner. It appears on our finest buildings, in our institutions, and even on the jerseys of our sports teams. Heraldry has another important role. It allows us to place our family in the history of the nation. A pictorial representation, sometimes set in stone at a particular point in time, gives us an opportunity to stand where our ancestors once stood and admire what they believed represented their place in the world. The ability to read a coat of arms gives an insight into the person who signed a document, endowed a building, fought in a military campaign, or was a spiritual guide to their community. Arms represent individuals, their place in history and their story. For those with an Irish identity, arms also give a sense of belonging, a reach into the past of which you and I are a part. The science of heraldry isn't exclusive to Ireland, although our heraldry developed in a unique way, with recognisably Irish characteristics. Heraldry is pan-European in its origin. Therefore, in order to gain an insight into the heraldry of Ireland, we need to look at what heraldry is and where it came from. The practice of placing graphic designs on shields and banners developed on the battlefield. It was important to know who was on your side, and the use of distinctive designs that could be easily identified at a distance began to develop in the 12th century. Following the Norman conquest of England, the use of mounted warriors, known in English as knights, became more prominent on the battlefield and in the retinues of feudal lords. These highly trained professional mounted soldiers developed into an elite group. Alongside the rise of the knight came a code of war and of honour known as chivalry. The word chivalry actually comes from chevalier, the French word for a mounted warrior or knight. Chivalry and warfare went hand in hand, and acts of bravery and chivalry on the battlefield had to be recorded. The job of recording these deeds was given to a particular person, the herald. A herald's role included the carrying of messages, judging on matters of protocol, and counting the dead on the battlefield. However, in order to record the deeds of bravery, honour and chivalry, the herald needed to be able to identify individuals. By the 12th century, the development of the full visored helmets meant that recognition became even more problematic. Thus, the adoption in the early period of individual shield and banner designs became important. As we will learn later, the practice of granting and recording these designs became the job of the herald, and although the placing of designs on shields and banners is more properly called armoury, the practice became known as heraldry. As heraldry developed, so did the basic practices to govern it. For instance, the base or field of a shield could be in a particular colour, metal or fur, and certain heraldic protocols were developed to ensure that the design would use these colours, metals or furs in a particular way, so that the heraldic design could be identified from a distance when displayed on a shield or banner. Remember, the purpose was to identify individuals on the battlefield. Now, take a look at the coat of arms on the right. Focus on the shield, not the crest above. We will come back to crest later. The coat of arms are attributed to O'Hine or Hines. Note the lions on the shield. On the left is a red lion, surrounded by gold. Gold is depicted in yellow when drawn. Now look at the gold lion on the right and notice that it is surrounded by the colour red. The zigzag line dividing the shield is known as an indented line. This coat of arms follows the basic rules of heraldry, which states that colours should not lie beside colours, and metals should not lie beside other metals. In the case of the Hines coat of arms displayed, the coloured lion in red is surrounded by the metal gold, and the gold lion is surrounded by the colour red. The field of gold on the left and the field of red on the right lie beside each other, indented by the zigzag line. The result is that this coat of arms would be easily identified at a distance and has an excellent balance of colour and metals side by side. And the use of the heraldic beast, the lion, further individualises this particular design. So we've used red and gold in the Hines example, but in heraldry, colours and metals are known in the language of arms. The terms used are a combination of Norman French, Anglicised Latin, and Old English. Let's take a look at the colours first and then the metals. The colours are known as, for red, gules, blue, azure, green, vert, black, sable, purple, purpure. The metals are gold, known as ore, and silver as argent. Remember from our Hines example, the colours should not lie with colours, and metals should not lie with metals. The general rule is observed in the design of flags. So let's take a look at some examples of flags from Scandinavian countries. Here we have the flags of Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Iceland and Finland. All follow the rules of ensuring the colours do not lie with colours. In the case of Sweden, Denmark and Finland, this is simple to accomplish. For Sweden, the gold cross lies with the colour blue. For Denmark, the silver cross lies with the colour red. And for Finland, the blue cross lies with the colour of the field in silver. However, in the case of Norway and Iceland's flags, it is necessary to separate the cross of colours from the field of colours with the insertion of a silver cross. In both cases, the silver cross depicted in white ensures that from a distance the flag can be read clearly. In all cases, these flags follow the rules of good heraldic practice. However, as with all rules, there are exceptions. The papal flag, for instance, lies gold with silver. In this case, it was necessary to move the coat of arms of the Holy See to the silver half of the flag, thereby allowing it to be seen clearly from a distance. So if we examine the use of colours and metals in heraldry, now we're just going to turn our attention to furs. You can see here from the slide the range of furs that are used in heraldry, and there is a variation in colours that are also used. However, in Irish heraldry, the fur that's primarily used is known as ermine. Ermine actually represents the white winter fur of stoats with their black tail tips. On the slide you'll see an example of where ermine has been used in the coat of arms of Garvey or Garvey. So collectively, colours, metals and furs are known in the language of arms as tinctures. So let's have a look at heraldic ordinaries. Ordinaries is the term for the group of large geometrical figures around which most arms are designed. Usually only one is borne at a time, for example a saltire, though the chief is often used with others, and you can see that in this example of the Fitzgibbon arms. At the bottom of the shield is a saltire, which is an ordinary, and at the top of the shield is a section with 3 annulets in the side. That section is known as the chief, and that is also an ordinary. Many of the oldest shields may consist of a single ordinary. The saltire, as in this example, is very common in Scots heraldry, as it represents the arms or the emblem of the patron saint, St. Andrew. In our Fitzgibbon example, the saltire is in the colour red. This saltire and this red saltire is also shared with the Fitzgerald family, but it is also used as an heraldic representation of St. Patrick. Now let's take a look at heraldic charges. Charges are figures of any nature or sort placed on the shield other than the geometrical ordinary. They may be real or fabulous beasts, plants, animals or objects. Many have names and shapes derived from medieval beasts. For instance, as we'll see later on the McGraw coat of arms, we have what's called a demi-antelope. That is a fantastical representation of an antelope, and we'll explain a little bit more about that later. Ancient or modern, their posture, form, colour and position are all governed by armorial terms and traditions. On the Fitzgibbon coat of arms on your left, you will see a charge of 3 annulets in red or guiles, to use the proper heraldic term, on a chief. Again, that's the ordinary we mentioned earlier, that section at the top of the shield. Now let's take a look at heraldic animals. Animal charges are popular in Irish heraldry, not only depicted on shields, but also used for the crest of a helm or helmet. We'll talk a little bit about that next. There are different conventions around the display of animal charges, and these again are recognised in heraldic or the language of arms. So, for instance, a lion rearing up is known as rampant. That's rearing on its hind legs. A lion standing is staddant. For birds with wings outstretched, that's displayed. Walking along, so a lion walking along, is passant. If the animal is looking towards you, it is also called guardiant or on guard. So to give you an example, on the right are the Royal Arms of England. These are well known, and these include 3 golden lions, one above the other, walking along on a red shield, or in heraldic code, guiles, that's red field, 3 lions, passant, 3 lions walking along, guardiant, on guard, or in gold. So we have a red field with 3 lions walking along on guard in the colour gold. It should be noted that the depiction of the coat of arms on the right is from a manuscript dated 1250 and written by Matthew Paris in his Historia Anglorum and Chronica Majora. The modern coat of arms of England often depicts the lands lined and armed azure. That is, they are depicted with a blue tongue, teeth, and blue claws. We now move on to heraldic helms and crests. The purpose of a helm is to display a crest in heraldry. The crest itself may represent something important to the actual armiger. That's the person who holds a coat of arms. And they can take a variety of forms, including heraldic beasts or other motives. The helm itself is displayed according to heraldic conventions. There are many different types of helms used in heraldry across the world today. But generally speaking, the helm itself is used in a particular way. So it depends on whether, for instance, you are a member of a royal family, if you're a peer of a realm, if you're a knight or baronet, or if you're an armiger, a gentleman armiger, or in a corporate body. Generally speaking, the helms can be divided up into four sections really. There's the royal helm, which always faces front, is always in gold, and has gold bars on the visor. If you're a peer, this will be a silver helm, but have gold bars on the visor. If you're a knight or baronet, it's generally displayed, the helm is generally displayed with the visor open, and it's clear to see that inside the helm it's lined in red. A gentleman or armiger is someone who holds a coat of arms, and they will have a helm displayed in steel with a visor closed. And this too is similar to a corporate body. The purpose of all these helms, as I said, is to display a crest. So we very briefly covered some of the aspects of the science of heraldry. It is a very large and in-depth topic, and I will list some further reading at the end of this presentation. However, now we'll turn to heraldry in Ireland. Gaelic Irish families began to adopt heraldry to identify kinship groups and territory. We can look back at some of the earliest depictions of Irish heraldry, and a document dated 1275 and preserved in Holland. We find a reference to the arms of La Roi d'Ireland, the Kingdom of Ireland. The description is azure, a harp, or very simply put, a blue field with a gold harp. These arms are still the arms of Ireland and are used by the President of the Republic of Ireland and displayed on a flag or banner at the Áras an Uachtaráin, the President's home in the Phoenix Park, Dublin. These arms are also displayed on all Republic of Ireland embassies across the world. Because of the history of Ireland and the fact that Northern Ireland remains a part of the United Kingdom, these arms of Ireland, that is the blue field with gold harp, also feature in the third quarter of the royal arms of Queen Elizabeth II. Going back to the past, in Gaelic Ireland, land was in the possession of a clan or sept, often a particular territory which was in effect autonomous, but under the patronage of a larger clan or sept. Gaelic chiefs who adopted arms in the medieval period could by custom be replaced by someone other than his son. This process is known as the Derfine, that is, a larger kinship group who would choose the clan chief. In Ireland, all members of a family have an interest in their chief's arms, and these chief's arms have been recorded by the Chief Herald of Ireland and are often a visual representation of the history of a particular family in Ireland, and they become the focus for that family and not just the individual who originally bore those arms and their descendants. The Clan McGraw are no exception when it comes to the fascination for coats of arms, and we're very fortunate that the earliest depiction we have of a coat of arms related to the McGrath family are those of Archbishop Miler McGrath. His coat of arms appear on his tomb. The tomb itself dates from before his death in 1622. Miler himself had the tomb constructed under his own instructions. There are two coats of arms depicted on the tomb itself. Perhaps the oldest, and we can say with some confidence, that was placed on the tomb at its time of construction, is a stone carving above the effigy of the bishop in the tomb niche inside the sanctuary of the Rock of Cashel. It's actually the Cathedral Church of St. Patrick on the Rock of Cashel. The stone carving is very interesting for a number of reasons. The coat of arms actually has a form of a crest in the shape of a bishop's mitre. This appears above the actual shield. The coat of arms also incorporates an archbishop's cross and a crozier, and these serve to divide the arms into 4 quarters. However, these quarters are not following heraldic convention as we know it, but they do serve to divide up the actual shield. You will see from the image on the left that the first or left-hand quarter depict 3 lands. These are actually depicted as passant guardian, which we discussed earlier. So the lands themselves are moving or walking, but their gaze is towards you as the viewer in a guardian manner or on guard. In the top quarter, below the mitre, is a hand holding a cross. We can't see from this particular image that it is a pattern of forme fiche, which we recognise. It appears to be a sort of standard cross. In the right quarter is a demi-antelope rampant. So rampant we mean on its hind legs. For the untrained eye, it appears to be a deer. You can see the antlers on it. However, this is interpreted as a demi-antelope. A demi-antelope is more of a kind of a fantasy animal. It isn't what we would think of as an antelope. In fact, its horns are actually quite jagged, and we can see some various demonstrations of this in other McGraw heraldry, which we'll look at later. In the bottom quarter, there is also a hand holding an axe. Again, this is better illustrated in the modern form of the McGraw coat of arms, but it's probably the one item in this stone carving that's most recognisable to us. So the McGraw coat of arms that appear on Miler McGrath's tomb above the effigy's head, we believe date from 1622. There is another coat of arms which appears on the front of the tomb, which is inset into the stonework. It appears to be from perhaps a later depiction, although some of the styling is very similar to this particular coat of arms, but it may have actually come from a separate piece, perhaps an altar piece or something similar, which had been broken, and the piece that survived has been set into the actual wall, although we can't tell for sure. However, in that particular depiction of the coat of arms, it is the more regular form that we are used to seeing. It's quartered into 4 sections, with the lance, the cross, the axe, and the antelope appearing in the fashion that we are used to. So, where did the McGrath arms originate? This is a good question, and actually we have some evidence that may point to the actual origins. The coat of arms appear on Archbishop Miler McGrath's tomb, and as we've already discussed, they feature a number of the charges which we are familiar with. We know that this coat of arms, as it appears in the tomb, dates from as early as 1622. However, we do have an earlier depiction of a coat of arms associated with Miler McGrath, and in turn with the McGraw name. On a painting of 1570, we see a coat of arms in the top left-hand corner. A copy of this painting appears on the right of the slide. We can identify that it is actually for a bishop, because there is an archbishop's or bishop's mitre which appears at the top of the coat of arms. We also see that the painting is dated as McGraw 1570. It's a bishop's mitre, as at this time Miler McGrath was the Anglican Bishop of Clogher. In 1571 he would become Archbishop of Cashel and move from Ulster, where the Clogher diocese is, to Tipperary to take up his position as the Archbishop of Cashel. This coat of arms is interesting because in it we actually see a colour depiction of a coat of arms, and it bears a white field with 3 red lines. Now the 3 red lines are positioned in a particular way, which would later be changed in what we believe is Miler McGrath's coat of arms. However, in this period, particularly in 1570, although the coat of arms is painted depicting the 3 red lines, the position may have changed, and it was still quite fluid at this time. The 3 red lines on the white field are likely the arms of Miler McGrath's father, who was Corrib of Loch Derg, and in turn chieftain of that particular area. So Loch Derg, as we know, the McGraths were Corribs of the Termon McGrath, Termon Amongan, and in turn Termon Dovag. This particular territory surrounded the pilgrimage island of Loch Derg. And the McGraws were Caribs. We know from as early as 1290, when the Corrib is recorded as having died in the annals. It's recorded in the annals of Ulster. So we know the McGraths have been in this position for an awful long time. And of course, like many Gaelic chieftains, at least Miler's father, maybe even earlier, adopted a coat of arms. And we see it here, but we believe, painted on this particular portrait of Miler as Bishop of Clogher. So we see that first part of the coat of arms, and one that we actually recognise, the white field and 3 red lines. And we know that in the modern interpretation of the coat of arms of the McGraths, the 3 red lines on a white field appear in the first quarter of that coat of arms. So Miler became Archbishop of Cashel, and we already know that he was using this coat of arms, the white field and 3 red lines, as early as 1570. By 1622, the coat of arms on his tomb have changed somewhat. They do incorporate the 3 red lines. However, they also have further charges. We know the cross, pate vichy, the battle axe, and of course the antelope. So it's likely that Miler actually adopted these charges when he became Archbishop. The cross pate vichy is a common cross used in bishoprics, both in Ireland and across Europe, and we can see examples of that. The battle axe could possibly be interpreted as a defense of the faith or of faith. And the antelope is again a commonly used heraldic charge in coats of arms, perhaps indicating steadfastness, and there is also the possibility that the horns represented both the New and Old Testaments. Again, it's very difficult for us to interpret these charges in the modern era, and really only Miler himself, or the person who designed that particular coat of arms for him, really know the representation. The only one that we really can be confident about is again the white field with the 3 red lines, which are depicted as passant. So we know that because of the 1570 painting. So we know that Miler was using these coats of arms as a Bishop of Clogher. In heraldic terms, the design on the tomb does not follow good heraldic practice. As we've discussed earlier, the arms that are depicted above his head are divided up using an archbishop's cross and a crozier. The charges themselves, there are quite a number of them, 4, and they're displayed around the shield. In the later coat of arms, it's divided up into more recognisable 4 quarters. But again, these quarters aren't particularly good heraldic practice, which proves that really the coat of arms themselves were adopted at the time, not necessarily registered with the proper heraldic authority in Dublin, but something of a more personal design relating to Miler himself. Having said that, of course, actually the 1570 coat of arms depicted on the painting is depicted following good heraldic practice. It's very clear from a distance what the coat of arms are, and they are very individual for that particular time. So what of the McGraw arms today? Well, we know now that Archbishop Miler McGrath probably assumed his arms in the late 15th or early 16th century, and these arms appear on his tomb in 2 stone carvings, one above his head and one placed inset on the wall of the actual tomb itself, and we've already had a look at those. We also know that those arms were probably based on earlier arms that were adopted by his father, and we have a good pictorial representation of those as 3 red lines passant on a white field. These appear in his 1570 portrait as Bishop of Clogher. Although we have a colour representation of that particular coat of arms, of course, the arms as they appear on the tomb are not in colour. In the 20th century, the chief herald of Ireland set about recording Gaelic arms and applying heraldic colours, metals and furs to them, particularly on coats of arms that were from stone carvings or graves. There may not have actually been a colour attributed to them, and the chief herald set about placing these arms into heraldic, or the language of arms, and applying the appropriate colours to them. And so it was with the McGraw arms. So blazons of arms, that is, the arms described in the language of arms, relating to the McGraths, is applied and recorded in 2 books. The arms of the McGraths of Ulster are recorded as argent, 3 lands passant giles, that is, 3 red lands on a white field. They're actually recorded in Irish pedigrees, the stem of the Irish nation, by John O'Hart. The arms of the McGraths of Waterford are recorded as follows: first quarter, argent, 3 lands passant giles. You'll note that that's the same description as the arms of the Ulster McGraths. In the second quarter, or a dexter hand fezwes, couped at the wrist proper. So that is a gold field with a hand cut at the wrist, holding a cross formé fiche azur. So that is a gold field with a hand cupped or cut at the wrist, holding a blue formé fiche cross. In quarter 3, giles, a dexter hand fezwes, cupped at the wrist proper, holding a battle axe or. So that is a red field, a dexter hand, dexter being a right hand, cupped at the wrist proper, so holding, cut at the wrist, and holding then a battle axe in gold. And quarter 4, argent, an antelope tripant sable attired or. So that is a white field, a black antelope on 3 legs, tripant, and attired in gold. That is the horns and hooves in gold. It's quite interesting because this is given as the description in both as the arms of the McGraths of Waterford in Irish pedigrees at the stem of the Irish nation by John O'Hart. It's given as the McGraw arms in Irish families, their names, arms and origins, by Edward MacLeod. However, we know that Miler McGrath was born and raised in the Termon in Donegal, Fermanagh border in Ulster. We know that he moved from Ulster and arrived in Tipperary, and bringing a large number of McGraths with him became Archbishop of Cashel. We also know that the coat of arms that appear on his tomb and the three lions particularly appear in a painting of 1570 when Miler was in Ulster, and these have been incorporated into the coat of arms on his tomb. So I suppose the question really is, are the arms actually a further interpretation by Miler of his own father's arms, so the McGraths of Ulster, taken to County Tipperary with his followers and eventually finding their way or being adopted by the McGraths of Waterford? So that's a question that needs further exploration. So now let's take a look at heraldry today. The Office of the Chief Herald of Ireland is part of the Genealogy and Heraldry Division of the National Library of Ireland. But heraldry and Ireland's heraldic authority is a very old institution. In fact, it's the oldest office of state in Ireland. Founded in 1552 and derived from an earlier medieval heraldry based on the traditions of sovereigns and members of the nobility, today the office has a much wider relevance, providing heraldic services for Irish people and institutions throughout the world. The Chief Herald is responsible for the granting and confirming of arms to individuals and corporate bodies, and all arms that are granted are recorded in the Register of Arms, which has been maintained in the Office of Arms since its establishment in 1552. Any Irish person or a person with a genealogical link to Ireland may petition the Chief Herald of Ireland for a grant of arms. So let's have a look at other McGraw coats of arms. As we mentioned before, the role of the Chief Herald of Ireland is to record arms and to grant them on individuals and corporate bodies. So over the last number of years, McGraths from around the world and from Ireland have petitioned the Chief Herald for grants of arms. Some of these coats of arms have charges which would be recognisable from the McGraw coat of arms on Miler McGrath's tomb and his father's coat of arms linked back to the portrait of 1570. These include lions, battle axes, crosses forme fiche, and antelopes, and these are located on the arms in various positions or in the crest. However, some other McGraths have petitioned for arms which have no connection with the charges of earlier McGraw coats of arms, and these are particularly unique. One thing to say is that when petitioning for arms, a McGraw can refer back to those older arms from the medieval period. So we know that, of course, Miler McGraths date from the 16th century and can incorporate those into a modern coat of arms. However, the arms that are found on Miler's tomb are arms that he assumed and were placed on his tomb. There are no clan coats of arms. Coats of arms belong to individuals. However, we do acknowledge the coat of arms of Miler McGrath and recorded in various books that give us an historical link to the past. And we use that coat of arms today as a visual representation of our clan heritage, history and culture. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. It should be noted, however, that we've only just touched on heraldry, and there is much more information and reading out there if you want to get a greater knowledge of the science of heraldry and the language of arms. There are also a number of websites that are available for those who are enthusiastic about heraldry, and also Facebook groups and pages, and those are freely available online. Just to reiterate that this is really just a touch on heraldry and just an introduction to it. So please do look further, explore this really interesting science further, and please enjoy it. I have put together a little bit of a reading list, and some of these books have been part of this presentation. So the first book is Irish Families, Their Names, Arms and Origins by Edward McGrath. The author was sometime keeper of manuscripts in the National Library of Ireland and held office as Chief Herald of Ireland at the then office in Dublin Castle. It took him about 12 years to collect the material for the book, which makes available in easily accessible form a wealth of information on Irish genealogy. The armorial bearings have been illustrated by the artist attached to the genealogical office from the blazons officially recognised there, and they are especially important in correcting many careless or misinformed representations of Irish arms, which had existed up to the point of this first publication of the book in 1957. The book itself is really accessible and really interesting. Say the first published in 1957, with a second edition in 1957 and a third edition and revised edition in 1972. And the book, and the current book that was used for this presentation, was reprinted in 1978. It's still available online and from all good second-hand bookshops or online sellers. Our second book is the Poolbeg Book of Irish Heraldry, and the author gives a fascinating account of heraldry's beginnings in Norman military craft, its adoption and adaptation by the Gaelic Irish to commemorate their heroic past, and of the changes that took place in heraldry with the changing political times. Our next book is Irish Heraldry, a brief introduction by Nicholas Williams of University College Dublin. The book was published in 2017, and there is also an Irish language version of this particular book. It also contains a foreword by Donald Begley, the former Chief Herald of Ireland. Our third book is Royal Roots, Republican Inheritance, The Survival of the Office of Arms. This is the absorbing story of the Office of Arms, Ireland's heraldic authority, and the oldest office of state. Founded in 1552 and derived from an earlier medieval heraldry based on the traditions of sovereigns and members of the nobility, today the office has a much wider relevance, providing heraldic services for Irish people and institutions throughout the world as the office of the Chief Herald of Ireland. There are also a large number of websites available for those interested in the science of heraldry. Here we've listed a number of the key heraldic authorities in Ireland, Scotland, England, Wales and Northern Ireland, also Canada and South Africa, and also a link to the Heraldry Society, which is a good website for further information on heraldry. There are also a number of Facebook groups, Facebook pages devoted to the subject of heraldry. And that brings us to the end of this presentation on the subject of heraldry and its links to the Clan McGraw. For more information on the Clan McGrath Society, please visit our website www.clanmcgrath.org, and also our Facebook and Twitter pages, the links of which can be found on the homepage of our website. You'll also find there a program for this online gathering where we will be hosting further presentations. So it just remains for me to thank you very much for joining us. If you have any feedback on the presentations or you wish to contact the Clan McGrath Society directly, you can email us at info@clanmcgrath.org. Thank you once again. Guramayogav.